Welcome to Overnight Wisdom, a show where we sit with changemakers, artists, business leaders, and thinkers. Each conversation is an invitation to slow down, to go deeper, and unearth the quiet insights that shape who we are. If you're seeking honest reflections, unexpected wisdom, and a deeper understanding of what it takes to not merely survive, but to thrive, you're in the right place. Today's guest is Thaïs Sala, artist, singer, and cultural curator. Her debut EP, Echo Museum, is part confession, part altar, an offering to what it means to feel deeply in a world that tells us not to. Beyond the stage, she grew up where hospitality is a way of life, transforming that into a gift for holding space, for people, for stories, for moments that leave a mark. From belting out Spice Girls at age 4 to leading an unplanned prison performance that became a moment of collective freedom, Thaïs has discovered that vulnerability and empathy are not weaknesses, but strengths. In this conversation, she opens up about identity, healing, and the courage to stop apologizing for your emotions. She reveals why boundaries are an act of love and why empathy may be the most radical thing we can practice. Thaïs invites us and challenges us to live, to feel, and to connect more deeply. Thaïs, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for being here. I'm looking forward to talking and learning a lot more about your work and what drives you to do and create as you do.
Well, thank you for having me.
So jumping right in, you've lived across Marrakech, the UK, Paris, also Montreal. How has moving between places shaped your emotional world? And how does this show up in your sound and your music?
Great question. I think one thing that I really carry with me wherever I go and has also allowed me to form deep relationships with people in different parts of the world and given me real connection to different communities is something that I really take from Moroccan culture, which is this sense of hospitality and sharing and friendliness. You know, from Marrakech, it's a city that has a lot of tourism. You meet people in town who speak 20 words in 60 different languages. So wherever they figure out you're from, they can talk to you in your language. There's a real sense in this culture of sharing. And, you know, I've been so touched my entire life here, meeting people from all sorts of backgrounds, people who have much to share, materially speaking, and people who have very little. And everybody just has this bottom line that, to use the cheesy line, sharing is caring, but that's really it. And I've noticed that going around the world, a lot of people have told me, oh, wow, like, you know, you seem really extroverted, friendly, or warm. I smile at strangers on the tube in London, which makes people think I'm insane, you know? And it leads me into scenarios where I really get to know people in a really special way. And that, for my emotional world, has meant that I've been privy to all sorts of really vulnerable moments with people around the world and people feeling, I think, quite comfortable to share their stories with me. I think that, you know, there's so much inspiration to be drawn from different people's stories and journeys and the lessons that they carry with them. It's given me, first of all, a lot of empathy, which is definitely a value I think I've been raised with. I feel really deeply. Definitely what a lot of people would describe as hypersensitive. In French, we have an expression that I love. It's like a double expression. You say le rire facile, which literally translates into I have the easy laugh, but it means it's easy for me to laugh. And then you also have j'ai la larme facile, which means I have the easy tear, or I cry easily. I have these unbridled emotions. And I have to say, like, for a long time in my life, I kept trying to, like, not be so emotional, you know, and I was told by many people, like, you know, you're too sensitive, suck it up, toughen up. And I actually did try to do that for many years, which was really frustrating because I couldn't. And when I started to tap into that as a strength as opposed to a weakness, it was just such a liberating thing in this world that's telling you just to be this like unemotional machine. Having a kind of a foot or a toe in these different places really gives me a sense that I can find and make a home anywhere. And that's thanks to the incredible people who welcome me into their homes, into their communities, and into their worlds and hearts. And, you know, in this world of terrible violence and inequality, it's really heartwarming to be reminded that there's actually so much goodness and love out there. And that really inspires my writing.
When did you find music?
Wow. So
When did it find you?
I can't remember exactly when, but I was super young when I started singing. My family has been in hospitality for a few decades now. I must have been about like 4. And I've been told this story that there were hotel guests who were trying to go out into the Medina of Marrakech to go, like, you know, shopping in the souks. And apparently I kind of like ambushed them on their way out of the property and said, no, wait, first you must watch me sing Spice Girls. And apparently, like, 4-year-old me, like this big, like, proceeds to be like, if you want to be my lover. Like, I have no idea what these words mean, but I'm singing them with so much conviction, you know?
I love that.
When I was a kid, my father would travel to the UK often for work. He was a university professor there. And I would have a wish list, and it was from one single destination that he had to go to for me. It was HMV. And I would just give him a list of all the CDs that I wanted. Every time he would come back, it would just be like Christmas. And I have so many memories attached to these CDs that I would be receiving. And I would make little mixtapes on my little stereo. I mean, there's certain artists who really got me into singing specifically because I've always loved music. But I'm thinking of like some of those CDs that like really, really marked me when I was young. Sade's always been a really big one for me. You know, the singer, but also the band, Sade. It's such an incredible ensemble of music minds, and everything that they've created I find really, really inspiring because it's super versatile, and yet it's always really true to itself. The jazz greats, because growing up, my parents were playing a lot of jazz, and Nina Simone's and the Billie Holidays, and a lot of that really influenced me, especially in terms of vocal technique, because I still haven't had any vocal training. So just listening to these records over and over again and just trying to kind of mimic them, I think is how I eventually found my own voice.
There's so much power in music, in how it uplifts people, in how a song can pick you up from 0 to 100, change your mood, and sometimes it makes you want to get up and dance. And I think that is the beauty. Musicians hold so much within them. It's not just about, at least how I think of it, sharing your art and your gift with the world. I think there's also that responsibility that maybe some people feel, knowing fully well that this music is going to move somebody. It's not just for me. I'm sharing this with the world. And I think that's really brilliant.
But you never know. You never know how it's going to land, and you never know how it's going to affect people. There's some incredible songs that I've been listening to for most of my life now that have this incredible legacy, that are so important in our socio-political histories. The first one that comes to mind when I think about this is A Change Gonna Come by Sam Cooke. Is the iconic American civil rights anthem. And it's a song that I learned about when I was young, and it came back onto my radar because one of my favorite artists, Maverick Sabre, did a cover of it I think it was on his first album. And it's just such a beautiful rendition. And then I started listening to it a lot and singing it a lot, his version and the original. And I was really, really taken by the power. I mean, Sam Cooke could never have known that even to this day, this song would have the resonance that it still does. And a couple years after that, I was studying in Canada at the time, and I was part of the Black Student Network. And it's a group of girls from the Black Student Network. We went in during Black History Month into a correctional facility, a prison, to spend the day with the inmates and show a film, have a discussion. And it was an incredible experience. The other girls were just kind of making like little speeches like, oh, it's been so great to hang out with you guys. And I was the last one in the line, and I was there like, I have no idea what I'm going to say. And the girl next to me says her thing, and then she goes, and now Thaïs is going to sing for you all. And this was not planned at all. And I remember I thought I was going to have a heart attack. And I just kind of was like, what do I sing? What do I sing? And of course, the first thing that came to my mind was A Change Gonna Come. And I mean, remember that this is Black History Month. We are standing here having just talked about all sorts of ways in which Black people are oppressed across the world and historically. We are in a building that is part of the prison industrial complex, and of course this song has this incredible power, and it is ultimately, a call to action to claim your freedom, or at least to give yourself permission to dream of it. And so I stand up, I start singing it, and then by the time I got to the second chorus, all of the inmates had stood up and started singing with me. And so there were I always get emotional telling the story. It was so intense. I mean, it felt completely surreal. It felt like, like a scene from a movie, and it was just so powerful. And we had like a big bear hug at the end, and it was just like a really beautiful moment. They were like thanking so much. And like, that's not allowed, but the security guards were like, we're not ruining this moment. This is too magic. Like, let's just let them be. And it's something that I would actually really love to do in the future in a more organized way, is go perform in prisons. In any case, that story for me is really a testament to the timeless power that music can have.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. That's really beautiful. And I love Sam Cooke. He's one of my all-time faves. And I love that song so much. On influence, actually, I'm thinking about how the different identities that we carry tend to merge into who we become in some way. And I know you carry a lot of layered identities. On the basis of identity, what identities are most present for you in this period of time and shape your experience of the world? And I'm asking this because I see myself also change as I move through different spaces. So just curious, in terms of identity, what is most present for you? And then how does that shift depending on where you are?
Yeah, that's a great and very complex question. There's something for me that is a really strong marker of identity, which is language. Identity is something built based on our connection and relationship to others and other things. There's a lot of external relationships that, for me, inform your identity. I feel like with different people in different parts of my life and from different eras of my life, it's not like I'm a different person, but it's like I'm that side of myself. And I speak in a certain way. So that's why language is so important to me in this kind of understanding of identity. I think that in terms of cultural and creative identity, Marrakech and Morocco is a huge influence on me. There's a huge tradition of storytelling. In fact, our main square here, Jemel Fna, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site for intangible history. And that intangible history is a lot about the storytellers and the fortune tellers that are just quintessential to the history here. This thing of bringing people together and sharing stories, a lot of which have lessons, sometimes lessons that even the storyteller hasn't understood yet. And that's the beauty and magic of it. That's something that I subliminally carry with me. I think there's really something to be said for a kind of a generational culture that is a mixture of different geographical identities, but that's really about this time now and here, and a really globalized culture. We all have access to, obviously, the internet and like music and film and pop culture and memes. And that for me is also a part of identity, but not necessarily one that is rooted in, a specific geographical place, but other sort of a collective consciousness.
Also reflecting on, what's coming up for me in that I think of myself in personalities based on the language I'm speaking. It's also quite interesting to see how the impact and just how it shapes and frames experiences, perceptions, and also from the perspective of sometimes there are feelings or expressions or that I can only explain in Igbo, where there is no other way to articulate that in English, in French, in Norwegian, in whatever. It's just a thing that I can only express in a particular language. So I love how you also reflect on that and weave it into, what you bring to your music, what you bring to your creative process, and also then your debut EP, Echo Museum, which feels in some sense as both a confession and a curation. Why that title, and what echoes were you listening for when you began this project?
Thank you. Yeah, I love this question. So it's really interesting because I think I was close to maybe like 70% done with the EP in terms of the writing when I came up with the name. First of all, I worked closely with Moses Belanger, who's a dear friend and a producer I've worked with a lot. So we worked together on this project, and it was really channeling a lot of the things that I was dealing with at the time, emotionally speaking. A couple of years ago, I started doing a lot of this kind of life coaching and mindfulness and mental health, and trying to unpack a lot of negative, toxic habits that I had accumulated over the years. And it's really difficult work that I'm still very much involved with. And I started writing the songs that are on Echo Museum in a space of really intense and quite violent spiritual transformation. And I really just needed to express my reflections and reactions to these moments in a really vulnerable space, in a safe space, which is exactly what the studio is to me. I love the etymology of words. I love looking at where they come from and also how their meaning has evolved over time. I started looking up just different kind of roots and synonyms and family trees of words connected to this sense of introspection and self-reflection. I, of course, stumbled upon the word echo, which I love. And for me, in picking the title, whether it's of a project or a song, or even the words in lyrics, the sound of the word is as important as the meaning of the word. I really love the idea of having basically an anthology or a collection of EPs before one day I release my debut album, which is further down the line. I really wanted to have a string of EPs that were connected thematically, but that kind of expanded on each other in a way. And so the idea was and is that I would have spaces that I invent and construct in my brain, and that every EP would be one of these spaces, and then kind of zooming out of that, so to speak, I was going to put my echoes into. And I got to Montreal one day and I went straight to the studio. I was in Moses's studio and I was practicing because we had a show the next day. And I look on his wall and there's this poster that's always been there and I've always seen it, but never really paid attention to what's written on it. And it said like Museum of Atlanta or something. And it was like a print from an expo, like a vintage print. And I saw it and I saw the word museum and I was like, that's it. And I went upstairs. I was like, that's it, guys. I have my EP name. And it was just as simple as that.
For those listening, I know we've said EP. It's an extended play, correct? It's like a musical recording that contains a number of tracks than just one single, but fewer than an album.
Yes, exactly. EPs are usually, I would say, 4 to 6 songs.
Yes, like a mini album. I like that framing. Okay, so let's talk a bit about your voice. As a musician, as an artist, your voice is your vessel of communication, of reaching people. And I mean, what I've heard from your music, it carries weight, it carries warmth. So that's a great combination. How do you stay grounded in what your sound is or should be? Or do you find that it's evolving?
Okay, that's such a great question. It definitely changes, and I really try to push myself out of my comfort zone and try stuff that I initially think sounds weird, or just to see, because you never know what you could discover. And I'm really lucky to work with a bunch of different musicians and producers who really encourage me and push me to step out of my comfort zone. And I've done like some voiceover work, and I love playing with the voice and like all the different characters and worlds that you can hold just like in your vocal. Amazing.
Absolutely. I also want to switch to another hat you wear. You do a lot of cultural curation and community building through your family-owned boutique hotel. You've hosted artists, thinkers, visionaries, who come from, nooks and crannies across the world. So I'm curious, in those conversations, what do you find that people are longing for? What have you learned about how people might carry pain or joy or love or culture? How do they think of home? And how has that impacted you?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking that. I started a creative residency here at our hotel, Jnan Tamsna in Marrakech. And I started it on Boxing Day of 2020, three. And I had 2 creatives arrive, a poet and a photographer, visual artist, and who were working on something together. And it was absolutely wonderful way to start the residents. I've had so many residents since, but that was the first one. And I've always said that in hospitality, because we've seen just all sorts of different characters come through. When people check in, they come in with their luggage and their baggage. And you never know what somebody's going through. And that's another thing that I think really helps build deep empathy, is the fact that you have to really remind yourself, you never know what somebody's going through, what they're carrying. Maybe they're running away from something. Maybe they're running towards something. Maybe they're, seeking answers or self-discovery. And so, I really try, in whatever capacity I can to hold space for that, because of course in that creativity there's so much vulnerability. I have had some people come who, as it turns out, were going through some pretty tough stuff, and I take that responsibility really seriously, even though I remind myself and try to be very clear also, I am not a trained mental health professional. I don't have the tools or the experience or the expertise to be able to use the right words. I can be your friend, and I can try to just provide a space where you can rest, recuperate, and recharge, and hopefully find inspiration and introduce you to people that you might collaborate with or that you might become friends with. That the residency program has been such an incredible learning experience on that. My father and I have been talking a lot recently about emotional attunement and this sense of being able to pick up on the ambiguities and the subtle little kind of breadcrumbs that people might share with you, even subconsciously, that are invitations to ask them how their soul is actually feeling. You know what I mean? Someone might tell you, for example, oh yeah, that guy at the party was weird. It sounds like a throwaway comment, but there could be a story that needs to be shared, or that person wants to share but doesn't feel they have the permission to be vulnerable. We have an incredible creative community here. The thing that I really try to be much more mindful about is trying to kind of read between the lines and see how you can hold space for people who maybe are saying, yeah, that's fine, but maybe it's not fine. And we've all been conditioned to answer good when you're asked, how are you? Even if you're really not good. You know what I mean? And then of course I created this program through the lens and from the perspective of being an artist. And I thought, okay, as an artist, what is the kind of space that I wish others held for me, or that others should just be holding for creativity and creative souls?
Yeah. So you talked about being conditioned as people. I do it all the time, It's very standard. How are you? Good, And as I got older and I got more into managing and creating boundaries as well for my mental health, when people would ask me that when I was not doing well, I'm like, do you want to know, or do you want me to say good? I could say it's either or.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, in places where I feel safe, not just to some random stranger on the road who's like, how are you? I don't unload on them. But I guess my question for you is, with what you've seen in terms of that conditioning to say good, how do you navigate that? If somebody's going to ask you, say, Thaïs, how are you doing? What do you say?
It depends on the person. I always try to find kind of original ways to describe it, but I'll say I've been intimately acquainted with anxiety and depression for many, many years now. And for years and years and years, the blanket answer would always be I'm good. How are you? I just divert and don't get into it, because once I start talking about my mental health, especially if I'm really in a difficult spot, then I feel like you've opened the Pandora's box or whatever, and it just can't be closed, and all the emotions spill out, and then for the rest of my day I'm just in despair. So I think that it's important to choose your audience and be discerning in that. Something really important that I've learned is that there's different people who are meant to have different roles in your life, and that's okay. There's some people who can't hold space for your mental health, and that's okay. But there are people who are going to gaslight you, and that's not okay. But if those people can't educate themselves and learn how to be, more, empathetic, then maybe they just have another role to play in life, or maybe they won't be in your life, and that's also fine. I mean, you were talking about boundaries. I'm obsessed with boundaries. I've been laying them down like it's nobody's business over the past few years, And that does mean that, some people, are like less in your life or not in your life anymore. There's no hard feelings there. It is what it is. And I think everybody just needs to look out for, for themselves within reason without like, hurting other people. But yeah, it's interesting because this question of like, what do you answer? Like how much truth do you feel you want to share with people? I mean, for example, working and growing up in hospitality, there's people around all the time and they ask you how you are. And there's a lot of times where you're not okay, but you just got to get up and keep doing the work. And, you almost don't want to answer because you don't want to lie. And it's because it's definitely, an industry, and the entertainment industry is the same, especially when you're kind of like facing the public, whether it's a client or an audience or anything. You want to try to be your best self and bring a good energy and everything. And you end up having to play pretend a lot, And it's not that you want to be lying to people, but first of all, like for me, I've always had this voice in my head being like, don't make your problems anybody else's problem. Which is somewhat unfair because there's a lot of people who want to be there for you, even if they don't know you. I mean, you were saying you don't want to bother random strangers on the street. Some of the most vulnerable and healing conversations I have had in my life have been with people I met on a bus and I have never seen again. And we, for some reason, just opened up to each other. But yeah, it's moments like that that make me think, wow, sometimes letting people in is actually really, really great. But I do think you have to be discerning because those expectations we're talking about are so, so important, because just one person gaslighting you or not taking you seriously in your vulnerability, one person can undo a whole life's work of like trying to open yourself up. So it's very important to be discerning and be like, is this the kind of person that will know what to do with my heart, essentially?
Yeah, I love that. Do they know what to do with my heart? It reminds me of therapy, at least based on what I am aware of. Oftentimes, a lot of people of color, especially women of color, go to therapy and are harmed by their therapists who are not like culturally attuned. For example, if they come from a different race, they don't understand their lived experience and then they have to defend it. They end up needing therapy from their therapy just to heal, and it almost ends their progress, especially when they're dealing with, say, things as heavy as racial trauma, for example. Yeah. And also to your point about meaningful conversations with strangers, or sometimes just being in a space where somebody else sees you. It took me back to when I first had my daughter, and the first time I ventured into the city alone, I think my daughter was maybe 3 months old, and of course, as we got onto the train, she just started crying, and I was overwhelmed. And she wailed and wailed, and everyone was looking at me on the train, no one offering help. I was an insecure mom, not knowing what the hell I'm doing, trying to nurse, trying to calm this baby. And then I step out of the train and I'm overwhelmed, I'm still trying to calm my baby. I'm trying to nurse her. I have one breast out for the public to see, nursing my kid, crying. And I'm, of course, at this point tearing up, and people are walking past me, like no one, they look at me and they just keep going. And this woman, a black woman, she walks up to me and she has a little kid with her. And she's just like, hey, give me your child. Let me just hold her for a second. And she just held my child while I collected myself, and she calmed my daughter. And after a couple of minutes, she handed her back to me and she said, you're okay. You can do this. You will do this. You're okay. And then she just left. I don't know her name. I don't know. I've never seen her since. But that was such a meaningful thing for me. It made me feel like, oh my gosh, you see me. And because it was really awful, people looking at me and like walking away. And I've always been very intentional. Like when I see somebody on the streets in the corner crying, I never walk past. I will always go by and say, hey, how you doing? Are you okay? Can I help you? Can I get you a taxi? What do you need? But that was such a meaningful moment to me, in a moment where my family was not around. My mom couldn't come. My sisters couldn't come. So I was really, really alone with my husband. And that sense of isolation and all the insecurities, just to have another woman say, you're okay. You can do this. That was so meaningful.
That's such a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing. You had me tearing up there. That's so beautiful. I love, but you see, we have these little guardian angels that just kind of swoop down and just like, you're okay,
Yeah, you're okay. You got
That's so
this.
beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, it's meaningful to me. I still hold it dearly. It's one of the most significant moments for me, I think, in early motherhood to have that support of like it felt like a sisterhood with somebody I don't know and may never see again, and that was so meaningful.
Yeah.
I want to ask you though, since we're on this route of like emotions and feelings and mental health, are there parts of yourself that you're still learning to hold, to trust, to heal, perhaps? And what does healing look like for you right now?
Well, it comes back down to what we were talking about, which is boundaries. I think that for me, I've been thinking a lot about what forgiveness means and how liberating it can be to forgive. And then I've also been thinking about how much I think true transformative forgiveness also relies to a certain extent on justice. Of course,
Yes.
you can apply this, to a kind of broader political and historical context, by looking at things like truth and reconciliation, and these kind of alternatives to more traditional law and justice, where communities come together and heal, and where the perpetrators of a crime are held accountable by like the family of the victim, and you have conversations and you really have this sense of closure, right? But on a more personal level, it's kind of about thinking, and actually Atonement, one of the singles from my first EP, it's about claiming your own closure and forgiving without receiving an apology.
Yes.
Because sometimes you just can't wait around for somebody who doesn't even know or have the mindfulness to realize that they wronged you in the first place, for them to apologize for something that they don't even remember doing, even though it had such a big impact on you. And so, but it's not to say that like people shouldn't be held accountable. But it's also about like your own well-being. Like, are you gonna hold on to this forever, or are you gonna find a way to make peace, but not just make peace by just sweeping it under the rug, but really reckon with what that event or that person has done to you. um and how it's made you feel. For me, that healing, it's really about finding a sense of justice that enables your forgiveness, and the most important forgiveness, of course, being a forgiveness toward yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like, especially when it comes to hurt and disappointment, there's so much where we can be the victims of enormous amounts of abuse and still find a way to blame ourselves for everything.
Yep.
It's a classic move from women. It's a classic move from Black women. We have been in societies that has really normalized this thing, the victim shaming. Once you kind of decide, what, it's not my fault that somebody was horrible to me or exploited me or abused me or neglected me. Like, no, I didn't do that. I'm not responsible for that. And so there's different things in terms of coming to terms with your journey and your traumas and unpacking everything that I'm really kind of in the midst of. And I think it's definitely a continuous journey and process. I don't think that one day you wake up is like, oh, I'm completely healed, I have no more wounds anymore, yay, awesome. No, I think that there's a kind of a cycles and rhythms to all this, and I don't think that you're necessarily ever like 100% healed, but you learn to carry your trauma even as you unpack it. I think you learn to walk with it proudly, and of course to broadcast it to the right audience, as we've been talking about, because not everybody can really hold that space. A lot of healing for me has been being really, really empathetic towards myself. I have a huge capacity for empathy for others, like, as with and everyone in the world. Like, I've had some pretty shitty things done to me, and I have generally, especially in these past few years, where I've really focused on empathy as a sort of a superpower, because I've like, not hidden from my pain. I've really tried to remember that everybody is the product of their environment, that there's a lot of generational trauma, that people are messed up because their parents messed them up, and their parents got messed up by their parents, and it goes on and on and on. Nobody is an isolated character. We are all the result of something. But of course, we also all have a responsibility to not just accept that, life has messed us up and therefore we're just going to be, not nice to people. So yeah, I think healing for me comes down a lot to this sense of channeling this forgiveness with justice that I was talking about, taking agency and just like really just reclaiming your own story and being like, you know what? This is not going to be rewritten by anyone else. I'm the author here. So yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I love that so much. Thanks for sharing. And that absolutely resonates, because I was just plus one into everything you said, like, yep, 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 that sounds familiar. And I know growing up, I held so much shame and blame in my body, in my bones for things that I didn't have anything to do with, for things where even though I was present, I couldn't give consent because I was a kid. But then that is what shame does. It's quite insidious. And I blamed myself and I rationalized and I over rationalized. And I think, and it took work, oh my gosh, to unpack and unravel and see myself, for what I am, and just to set myself free from other people's baggage. And I am so grateful for that, opportunity. And at the same time, it has helped me. I am militant with boundaries. People say, oh my gosh, how can you not talk to a family member? Let me show you. I will not. I am militant about protecting my mental health because I know how fragile it can be. And I also love what you say about sometimes you're never going to get that apology or not a genuine one. When I see that also as a generational thing, like uncles, aunties, parents, who are just like, I brought you into this world, be grateful. I did this for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
You should thank me, for like bringing you here. And then just finding ways to have compassion for them and empathy. And one of the things I had to learn about empathy was that I could empathize with somebody and still disagree. That my empathy is not the same as agreement. And that was such a good place for me to release myself from. I empathize with you, but I disagree. And I'm going to remove myself from this situation. And sometimes, even say with friendships that no longer are healthy, is I'm going to love you and leave you. So when you were talking, I mean, that resonated a lot for me. And one last thing here is also grace. Like you, I think I'm really good at being graceful and forgiving of other people and being kind to other people. And only in the past like 5 years or so, I have been more intentional in giving myself and showing myself more grace. Like Chisom, if you were your own friend, what would you say? And then I have to treat myself like that.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that sense of kind of trying to look, like take a step back and look at it from a different perspective. Like if you were your own friend, like what would you say? My therapist asked me recently to write. I was telling her about like my childhood, and I had a wonderful childhood, although I did get bullied a lot for like years and years at two different schools. And it was really, really tough. Thank you. It was really tough. It was really challenging, but at the same time, like, I feel like everything that I have experienced in life has brought me to where I am and who I am now. So I don't have any regrets. But she asked me to write a letter to my younger self, particularly at the age where I was kind of like at the peak of these challenges, and just like really, really tell my younger self what I think I would have needed to hear at the time. And it was the most incredible exercise that I really recommend to everyone. And then when I was done, I read it out loud. It was magic. Honestly, like just that exercise, I swear, is worth like several therapy sessions in terms of the healing power of that. And then actually, there's something else that I wanted to add to your question about healing, which is one of the most liberating lessons that I have had shared with me throughout this process of doing life coaching and therapy and different kind of delving into different practices of mindfulness is the revelation that very little, if nothing, of how people treat you actually has anything to do with you.
Yes.
That's just But that's been a game changer for me, you know, because like I definitely have this kind of like slightly paranoid tendency of thinking that anytime somebody does whatever and it ends up getting with me having my feelings hurt, my automatic reaction is like that person literally laid out a plan like on their wall with like maps and shit to figure out how to break my heart, you know? I was like, this was calculated. It's like 99.9% of the time they didn't even notice. They won't remember. A lot of the time they don't remember. That's what's crazy with trauma like inflicted by others.
Yes.
Is that so many of the times people don't even remember that episode that is like seared into your brain forever, you know. So learning to like not take things personally in that sense, I think, is also a really important part of the healing.
Yes,
Really
thanks for
important.
adding that. Completely agree, you know. And I think this is situations where, what's that saying? It's not me, it's you. Yes,
Yeah.
it's like, it's not me, it's definitely you.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Thais, what are you no longer apologizing for? And what made that boundary possible?
Probably wearing Birkenstocks with socks. No, I'm joking.
I mean, I still do that.
It
That's
was a big
amazing.
move. It was a big move. To come back to seriousness, things that I am no longer apologizing for. I mean, I'm no longer apologizing for being so sensitive. That's a big one for me. That's a big one for me. And like, even if I have to like literally like have a conversation through tears, maybe barely audible because I'm choking up, I'm like no longer apologizing for that. I feel like I've definitely been pegged a lot of my life as like, even though someone who's sensitive, somebody that who just kind of brushes things off quite easily when things are not done in the most kind way. In the last couple of years, I just kind of came to the realization that, you know, that image has maybe meant it so people take me a little bit for granted sometimes, or just will just assume that like, you know, I won't care and you know, just maybe do things with a little bit less care and intention. And so I decided to just kind of be a lot more open about how I feel about things, you know, because I do think I owe it to myself and to others to, instead of building up resentment for things that I haven't expressed I'm not okay with over years and years and years, and then one day exploding, maybe just having like a little bit more regular in my check-ins and expressing that so that, you know, it's healthier. But generally speaking, yeah, just not apologizing for my emotions anymore. Let's get over the fact that everybody's so uncomfortable with emotion. Of course, now, you know, in the kind of public conversation, it's a lot more normalized and people are talking a lot more about mental health. There's still so much work to be done, you know. There's still a lot of this sense that, you know, certain communities, if they are perceived as having bigger fish to fry or more important problems, that they're not entitled to pain, that like seeking therapy is something that's for rich white people. I mean, I think that everyone and their dog should be in therapy.
I think, you know, what you say is so spot on also on there's such a stigma with mental health. And mental health includes, I think, just the ability to cry or to say, this doesn't feel good. You know, and the thing that annoys me is if I'm in a conversation and somebody's just like, yeah, but why are you emotional about this? And I'm just like, so you're going to fixate on what you consider the emotion to be bad rather than on what I'm saying? Is that a way to gaslight or tone police how I'm engaging in what I need to say? And I've been a huge believer of the, you know, there's a saying, people treat you how you let them. That really resonates with me. And I think oftentimes, you know, when you talk about like therapies for white people, it's like that's such bullshit. Especially Black folk, people of color, people who are racialized. We need therapy, we need support, you know, because it's a lot to carry.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
If younger Thais could see you now, what would leave her in awe? And what would you want her to know?
Man, this is just making me emotional just thinking about it, just because of that letter and everything. What would leave her in awe? I think that she would be happy at how like self-assured and no nonsense I am now, after definitely like a lifetime and a childhood of like intense people pleasing, which I still do, and I really care about people around me being happy, but I am so much more conscious now about not having that pleasure or pleasing be at my expense. And I think I think she'd also be happy that I, at least I think, am quite kind. Because, ultimately, I think that, sometimes as kids, you see adulthood as this thing where, yes, you're like grown up and you have responsibilities and you have power, maybe, or influence. Maybe there's the sense that if you're a go-getter or whatever, that you're not, that you're very like self-involved and that you don't necessarily like think about others as much. So I think that that's something that she would probably appreciate. I just would want her to know that like people treat each other not always with kindness, but everybody's carrying their own baggage and it informs the way that they treat other people, and that people maybe have not gotten there yet in terms of figuring out like what kind of person they want to be to others and to themselves and to their community. And that's okay. Everybody goes at their own pace. And just to try to have empathy for that, but at the same time, not let those people convince you that you're, anything less than you are.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And finally, the self you're growing towards. When you think of your future self, 10 years, 20 years, what do you hope she's fiercely protecting?
Integrity. Integrity and community, of course, always. I hope that future me has an even deeper sense of purpose and even greater empathy. Definitely think this is going to be the case just because I think it's part of my essence, but always that youthful curiosity, always. Always finding a way to be enthusiastic, to be excited, to be hungry for new experiences and for inspiration, and never to be, blasé about the incredible privilege that it is to just be alive in the first place.
And so it will be. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for sharing. This has been really good, really nourishing. I really appreciate your time and your honesty.
Thank you so much. It's been so great. Thank you for your incredible questions. It kind of felt like a therapy session. You put me through all the feels. Now I'm going to go hug my dog. That was like a healing moment. It was really wonderful. Honestly, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
So great.
Thanks for being here. Thank you for spending time with us on Overnight Wisdom. If this conversation moved you, inspired you, or made you pause, please leave a comment, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. You can follow the show wherever you get your podcasts, and if you're feeling generous, a rating or review goes a long way in helping others find us too. Until next time, stay curious, stay tender, and may the wisdom you need find you exactly when you're ready.